I spent over 7 years going round and round in circles when it came to desperately trying to get better from my chronic condition. I tried basically every single thing out there, and what I ended up finding out was that nothing was giving me lasting results. That was until I found out about this very profound piece of information to do with the body. And that's that our body is operating in a way where the function of our organs is completely reliant upon the commands that are given to them. And these commands are given to them by the brain, which is also completely reliant upon the information that is fed into it. This information is originating from part of our peripheral nervous system called our sensory nervous system, and in particular, certain types of receptors called mechanoreceptors. And what these mechanoreceptors do is they help us to detect various variables about our surrounding environment, and then they relay this information to the brain, and then in turn, the brain then decides what to do with it. And some of these variables that these mechanoreceptors help our body to detect include the likes of touch, pain, temperature, pressure, movement, and vibration. Now, the one realization I had that genuinely changed my life and my whole approach to my own recovery was understanding that this sensory information from these receptors and the neuronal pathways that were delivering them to the brain was the key determining factor that was influencing how the brain then in turn got the rest of the organs in the body to actually work. More simply put, if there are dysfunctions or disruptions with these neuronal pathways and the ways that they actually communicate from these receptors to the brain, then the likelihood is that we're going to end up suffering with symptoms. And if there's any chronic abnormalities with the functionality of these pathways, then the likelihood is that we're going to end up experiencing chronic symptoms. You see, what ends up happening is that every single time one of these sensory nerves is stimulated, it will send this information into the brain, which will take it on board, and then in turn the brain will elicit a motor response, meaning that it will get the organs in our body to respond in a way that it deems fit. If the stimulus or the sensory information has been accurately decoded by our brain at an unconscious level, then the likelihood is we're not going to notice any adverse effects as a result. However, if it hasn't been accurately decoded and the brain has taken on board inaccurate information, what that's going to mean is the brain isn't going to be able to make sense of so many variables about our everyday life, and in turn it's going to make our life a real struggle. It's basically like saying what goes in must come out. And if our brain is continuously receiving poor neuronal signals from our sensory nervous system, what this is then going to result in is the brain sending suboptimal commands to the organs in the rest of our body. This could be in the form of abnormal limb movements, abnormal heartbeats, abnormal blood vessel contraction and relaxation, abnormal GI movement, and even abnormal immune system activity and hormonal release. The list goes on and on. So there's causes and then there's effects. And the reason as to why so many people are stuck in this vicious chronic suffering cycle is because they're investing all of their time and efforts into desperately trying to fix motor outputs, meaning effects that are automatically being produced by our brain at an unconscious and ongoing basis. But if you're serious about putting an end to this vicious cycle, then I highly recommend checking out the Unbeatable Blueprint online course. This is where I'll teach you the key reasons as to why your chronic and often debilitating symptoms continue to persist. And I'll provide you with a step-by-step plan of how you can finally start to make long-term improvements to your current situation. Again, just to emphasize the point I'm trying to make in this video, the reason why the vast majority of those with the likes of POTS, dysautonomia, chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, and long COVID are stuck in this vicious symptomatic cycle is because they're spending so much of their time trying to directly fix symptoms. But what they don't realize is that symptoms are merely a byproduct of a problem that's occurring further upstream. Once they're able to have this aha moment and recognize that the only way of establishing lasting changes within the body is actually to work on ways of optimizing how the brain receives and processes sensory information, it completely changes the game for them, and it completely alters the entire pathway they're on when it comes to actually wanting to achieve recovery. And that's because they're no longer trying to impact downstream effects of the dysfunction. Instead, what they're doing is addressing the dysfunction itself at its very root cause. This is an indirect approach, which firstly involves you being able to identify any red flag outputs, which basically means any undesirable effects that your brain is producing in the systems in the rest of your body, and then finding ways of actually accessing these neuronal pathways and training them further upstream so that they're able to have desirable effects on the systems in the rest of your body, which is something that does require intervention from a trained healthcare professional. It all comes down to fine-tuning sensory inputs so that your brain is able to have the most optimal motor outputs. And once you're able to achieve this outcome, then by proxy, most of your symptoms should gradually fade away. And the reason for this is because you're gradually restoring your body back to its original and most optimal state. I totally appreciate it's a confusing topic to get your head around, but it's a little bit like one of those magic eye pictures where some people see it and others don't. But if you are a person that does see it, then you can't unsee it, and you realize just how life-changing it can actually be to the future of your health and your all-round quality of life.